Now, I know those in the fandom who are most concerned with the lore of the show were somewhat disappointed by Mother of Olms, because it confirmed a lot of what we in the fandom had already known and suspected for a lot of months now, even if it's that which the characters did not really know. Also, while it was not an entire episode devoid of lore, the focus of the episode was more on the rather disturbing and intentionally gross images of our main heroes trekking through the inside of Mother Olms' head, with the lore only appearing right at the end. But we still receive a lot of good information here, a lot of interesting and subtle hints about the future direction the show will take. So I think we should engage with those hints. We should look into them and examine them to see what subtle and beautiful secrets we can unveil. Anne, Sasha, and Marcy are the three parts of a distinct and grandiose prophecy to save Amphibia from evil. This is interesting, considering that it assumes that the three of them were going to get transported to Amphibia, and the only reason the three of them were transported to Amphibia originally was because Marcy saw the box, knew it could transport them into other worlds, or at least hoped it would, and convinced the two of them to help her get the box for herself. Then they would open it and be transported into another world, and they would have different lives. Lives far away from the resentment and bitterness Marcy feels toward her parents, her sense of being trapped and isolated, her sense of not having any control over her own life, to the extent that she breaks down in tears and knows that her bonds with Anne and Sasha are never going to be the same if she goes along with what her parents want. All of those personal dynamics cannot really have been, practically speaking, assumed by the prophecy. And if they are, in fact, just a product of the prophecy, that kind of cheapens them. It cheapens the genuine emotionality of Marcy's torment, of her desperation that eats away at her to such an extent that she seeks to leave her comfortable reality, at least materially comfortable, full of people who probably at least claim to love her, for a dangerous fantasy world. She didn't know she would end up in King Andrias' castle. She could have just as easily ended up like Anne, sleeping in the woods, or worse, Sasha, who was captured and held for probably about a month in prison. She didn't know what would happen to her, and yet she made the choice to have the three of them swipe that box anyway. And after all their time there, she has no desire to come back. That's how desperate Marcy is to get out of her own life. That's how deeply she resents the life she once had. And to just ascribe all that to the prophecy says so cheapens those character dynamics a bit. But I really don't want to complain. I like this prophecy. I think it's interesting, and I'm quite curious to see how the show plays it going forward. Contrary to the sighs of a lot of disappointed fans, we do have interesting pieces of information here. Now, first we should go over the stuff we already knew. We have the 3 stars being Anne, Sasha, and Marcy teaming up to defeat the Knight, which is the core / Andrias. And in fact, Andrias and the core have been associated with this idea of the prophecy and this idea of the Knight for so long that until the name of the core was revealed, people just used to call the core the Knight. Going from all the way back, I believe, in the first temple, which is the first time we see the core. And that was over a year ago. So, what's going on here? We know that we're going to have our grand fight of our heroes versus the forces of evil. Are they chosen heroes? Maybe? And if they are, what does that mean, considering that the prophecy foreseeing their coming was made 1,000 years ago? Has no one touched those gems before Anne, Sasha, and Marcy? What I find particularly interesting is Sasha's silly but relatable question in which she asks the Mother of Olms whether she and Marcy will have cool anime powers, like Anne. Sasha is, of course, a big fan of anime, despite her frequent attempts to look cool and avant-garde and very noble, and not someone who would indulge in something dorky like anime. We see Sasha's telling Percy and Braddock to do their kawaii poses all the way back in Beryl's Warhammer, so I like the constant references to Sasha secretly being an anime dork. But what's even more interesting is that the Mother of Olms' answer to Sasha's tossed-off query is yes. The powers can be transferred from Anne to Sasha and Marcy, as long as Anne holds on to her powers. Which is curious. That they mention that basically guarantees that we are going to see some operatic showdown by the ending of the show in which Anne, Sasha, and Marcy all get their glow on and fight the core with their supernatural prophecy powers. The powers, while they're held by the gems, are not merely contained by those gems. The powers can come back into Anne, Marcy, and Sasha. Now, I'm not sure under what circumstances this can happen. I imagine that if Anne just tried, when she's in her normal state, to give Sasha the ability to activate her flaming pink powers, that would probably not succeed. But perhaps when Anne has already brought herself into her flaming cyan state, she would be able to transfer her powers to Sasha, or perhaps activate Sasha's own powers and allow Sasha to harness her power even though she gave it up. So the predictions of all that beautiful, electrifying, ethereal fan art, all those predictions are true. The three of them are going to be able to share in the ability to make their eyes glow and have all these amazing capacities coursing through them. So those of you who want to see that happen, have no fear, it will happen. They would not have brought this point up had it not been certain that this was going to happen. But we also have to think about the idea that these powers naturally belong to the girls, which Mother Olm emphasizes. The powers are theirs by rights. Andrias intruded and took those powers, but that was an act of theft. That was an act of breaking them away from what naturally belonged to them. So that raises a lot of questions. Does that mean the temples were bad? Does that mean the temples were built to help Andrias undo the prophecy and contain the powers of Anne, Sasha, and Marcy? And drain all their powers into gems, which can then be used by Andrias to access different worlds? And if that is the case, does that implicate everyone who helped in the guarding and protection of those temples? Like, is Valeriana someone that we should consider guilty because she helped in these temple missions, which really helped to drain these girls of their powers? And that raises a whole other suite of questions. If the temples are designed to drain these girls of their powers, then was that the original function of the temples? Is that what they were built for all those centuries before? And if so, why were they allowed to fall into decay and disrepair before the girls actually came to the temples? And also, why would then these temples force these girls to pass a trial before they can have the honor of having their power drained away from them? It would seem that one would want to encourage that power being drained if you're Andrias and his cater, instead of making it as hard as possible for these 3 girls to pass their trials and get that power drained. Whatever the answers to these questions are, I'm sure these answers will be interesting, and I'm sure we will receive more information in The Core and the King, in which the backstories of everyone in this world, especially Andrias, are brought to the light. Perhaps we'll see more about the temples and the gems and how were they created and for what were they created. Is this a Sauron situation in which Andrias tricked others into crafting these gems and temples for his own nefarious purposes? Either way, we see a resurgence of myth through this prophecy. We see that which has been forgotten and dismissed in this focus on modernity and progress and innovation slowly coming back into the light. The uncovering of myth is connected to regeneration and renewal in a fragmented world, as brilliantly demonstrated by T.S. Eliot in The Wasteland and James Joyce in Ulysses. That which has been dismissed in this technological world is brought back through methods that reach beyond the material and the technological into the mythic, into the ancient heart of this world. And so we get a sense of rebirth, of the coming of spring, of a general sense of societal renewal, and perhaps we'll see the toppling of Andrias and hopefully the toppling of the entire caste system that governs Amphibia. I hope the girls will use their powers to help restore a barren realm. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. What do you think will happen with the gems? What do you think will happen with our 3 girls finally teaming up to defeat Andrias? Will that proceed as we tended to expect, or will there be an unexpected turn? Who knows? Sound off in the comments. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Sooner, if you donate to my Patreon and get everything before others. See y'all soon. Adios, comrades.